Good morning on this Sunday, January 26th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. More details are emerging on the state budget. We take a deep dive on the possible cuts lawmakers are considering. Democrats may soon have a new high-profile candidate in the Senate race number 2, and a state lawmaker wants to put an end to hair discrimination. Theron, Phil, Janelle, and Cathy Wood are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
This week, we learn new details on Governor Kemp's state budget priorities. Democrats are skeptical of the proposed cuts of 4% this year and 6% next fiscal year.
I'm proud of the common sense savings included in this budget. I believe that we've shown taxpayers that we're good stewards of their hard-earned money. And with this blueprint, we will continue to build a state that Georgia will be proud to call home.
The difficult decisions are ahead as state lawmakers pore over Governor Kemp's proposed budget. Some Democrats worry about the cuts the governor did not bring up.
We're hearing things for the first time right now. We don't know what's real, we don't really know what's not being said.
This is all part of Governor Kemp's call for state agencies to reduce their budgets by 4% this fiscal year and another 6% next year. His request is partly because of declining state revenues, but it's also to fund Kemp's priorities, including more money for the GBI's gang task force and raises for teachers and state employees.
We're going to have to spend really every day going through the budget, and it's going to be a big ticket item. And we have to be honest, there's some legislative initiatives that may not get passed because the budget is going to really suck the air out of the room.
Well, Theron, I want to get right to you because you've spent so much time at the state capitol this week. What's the mood there in terms of the budgets? We had the budget hearings. We heard from Department of Agriculture this is really going to hurt them when it comes to inspections. We also heard about mental health, that this was really going to cut into the mental health budget. So what is the thinking down there, and how difficult will it be to kind of move the numbers?
And there's been some concern as well around public defenders. You've had some high-ranking district attorneys, lawyers, all come out questioning whether that cut is necessary. But I also want to just kind of give you a taste of what I experienced this week, is that, Lori, I think that I've been lobbying now for about 10 years. This was the most I've seen for people actually down there looking at what's in the budget proposals, actually being in the meetings. Legislators, I mean, they deserve a lot of credit. I mean, even though we're not in session, we're in session this week, but I mean, everyone is basically going through with a fine-tooth comb and looking at every single thing that the governor proposed. Now, one thing that also I want to highlight for our viewers is that in this budget that Governor Kemp put forth, he's allocating about $45 million to try to give people who make under $40,000 a $1,000 raise.
Right.
And so that was something that I think is kind of getting overshadowed with the mental health, with the public defenders and teacher pay raises. But if that were to go through, I think that would be significant for a lot of state workers who work very, very hard and who earn less than $40,000 a year.
That's difficult, though. On one hand, you're giving some employees raises, the teachers possibly $2,000, but yet other state employees not so much, and you're making cuts.
Well, that's right, and I think Theron was right. They're doing a lot of work this past week. I was over at the Capitol, too, with the budget hearings. It is a matter of priorities. You're absolutely right. I think that we're going to get that teacher raise. I've been talking to some people. You know, the governor and the legislature gave teachers a $3,000 raise last year. I think they'll get $2,000 this year. I think the tax cuts are there. I think they're looking for new revenues. You know, we discussed the last couple weeks. I think if it happens, it may happen this year with regard to passage of the people voting on some sort of gambling legislation. So I think that there's been a lot of media hype, too, about how the cuts are affecting people. Yes, cuts do affect people, but I think there's been too much media hysteria.
Janelle, weigh in on that. Is there too much hysteria when you have department heads down there at the hearings, though, saying, you know, we're going to have less inspectors. We're going to have less.
They always say that. They always say that. I can't have any cuts whatsoever. I've seen that for 30 years.
It's a little different this year.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that it is important, and I do think that this is something we need to really look into. My thing is, when you're cutting budgets, especially to services that are paid for by the taxpayers, then we have to consider, you know, what are we getting in return as taxpayers. But I think think we should go back into when we're talking about the revenue piece. I know I mentioned before that we need to really focus on taxing the Lyft drivers and being aware of some of these extra streams of income that's coming into the state that's not being taxed appropriately, and I think that needs to be a good focus too.
Cathy, you've spent time down at the Capitol too and working on budgets as the former city council president of Atlanta. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the devil is in the details of these, and so, you know, it's great nighttime reading to sit down and actually look at the budget narrative and see what's going to be cut. One of the things that didn't get mentioned were $15 million cuts in county public health services. That's inoculations, that's primary care, that's care for kids, HIV testing and care. Those are things that are healthcare priorities for the state. We don't do well, and so to have $15 million in cuts in places that don't have hospitals and doctors' offices is people are going to feel it, and I think you're going to see that backlash come. I think this budget is too strict, and I think continuing to hand money back when you're not covering basic services is just not the right way to go.
Phil, what do you think? Will we see a lot of Republican infighting on the budget issues?
Well, I think you'll just see infighting, not necessarily Republicans and Democrats, although that occurs, but you're going to see urban versus rural. That's been around for at least 25 years. The priorities, of course, the governor is trying to do more focus on rural transportation, rural health. And so a lot of this is not partisan. It's priorities, as we're talking about at the beginning of the show.
And there's some legislators who are really down there this week looking to make sure that some of the specific projects that were in the budget or that they've been sort of promised that they've been working for during this session and previous sessions that don't get cut, because you got to remember they got to go back home and they got to run for re-election, and so they got to have something to turn to say that I worked with this, you know, gubernatorial administration or this lieutenant governor or speaker to get this done for my district. So they're also paying very close attention to that.
All
as
right,
well.
well, you brought up the election, so let's move on, because Georgia's Senate race that we call Senate race number 2 could get very interesting in the next couple of weeks. The AJC is reporting that Ebenezer Baptist Church pastor Reverend Raphael Warnock will throw his hat in the ring to challenge newly appointed incumbent Kelly Loeffler. Theron, I want to start with you. Does this clear the field for Democrats? Because if he has the support of Stacey Abrams, is it Democrats will rally around Reverend Warnock?
No. I'm sorry, I mean to be so blunt, because I think that, you know, we in the Democratic Party, we never really want to discourage anyone, he or she, from running. However, if she decides to endorse him, if he officially gets in, I'm actually hearing mixed reviews. Some people saying that he's thinking about running. Some people saying that he's trying to work out some personal issues. He's trying to work out some issues at his church to make sure this is all kind of moving forward for him to run. But yeah, if Stacey Abrams, who we know can raise tens of millions of dollars instantly for anyone running for anything, he definitely moves to the top of the list. But I don't think it would discourage others from getting in the race.
Kathy, let me weigh in on this, because since you're a Democrat, I want to ask you just kind of your opinions on this. I mean, he's clearly a great orator. We saw him Monday on King Day right in front of Kelly Loeffler. So what are your thoughts? I mean, he's really far left as well.
Well, I don't know how far left he is. If he runs as a candidate, then we'll be able to see that. Obviously, former Senator Ed Tarver's in the race. He's a moderate. He's somebody who, you know, probably didn't throw his hat in the ring casually and has his race going on, so he's probably, you know, willing to stay in for a primary. We'll see what happens. Now the clock's ticking. If you'll remember a couple months ago, I said Democrats got some time in the world. They're waiting on the governor to make his play. He did. Now it's time to get to work. So I think we'll see a decision soon.
Phil, what would that mean for, you know, Kelly Loeffler? If Raphael Warnock gets in, there's still talk of possibly of Doug Collins getting in.
Well, obviously, Republicans want more Democrats in to fracture their party even more. You've got, you mentioned Ed Tarver, the African-American Augusta attorney who is more centrist. And Warnock is a radical. How do we know that? Because we listened to his sermons, so we have a record there. And so I think that the Democrats have just as many problems as the Republicans in this primary in November for the Senate seat, where it's a free-for-all. And so I'm hearing now from Washington and here that Doug Collins hasn't made a decision. I think he's going to look, as well as Kelly Loeffler, the incumbent senator, now is going to look at the polling in March, and that's probably when qualifying is going to be, and then you'll see some decisions on the GOP side.
So Janelle, real quick, last word on this, because we got to move on, but you know, we've seen Doug Collins again out front and center defending President Trump. He's getting a lot of airtime again.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, one thing that we have to keep in mind, too, is that I don't know if it's necessarily because he's planning to run against Senator Lefner or if it's because of the fact that he's thinking about other seats that may be coming up down the line as well. And let's not forget, if we take back the House, he'll make a great speaker. All right,
coming up, the Atlanta City Council votes on an independent inspector general. We'll discuss straight ahead.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
The Atlanta City Council unanimously voted to approve an independent inspector general to help weed out corruption. Still a few more steps to go until this is final, but a big step as lawmakers who want a state takeover at Hartsfield-Jackson International are in session across the street. Kathy, what do you think about how this all shook out? Because there was some controversies over the independence and the ethics and the compliance.
I think we still have to see how this is going to work out, right? It's one thing to write legislation. It's another thing entirely to actually implement the policy that you've put into place. I think the fact that it's taken 3 years to get to this point in the discussion, even though all of us who ran for mayor and who ran for city council talked about trying to beef up ethics for the city, that was a key discussion point during the campaigns. So, let's get the policy through and actually start seeing if anybody's going to uphold anything.
Phil, as somebody who's very critical of the city, is this a step in the right direction?
I'm critical of city corruption. I'm not critical of the city. And this, again, we look at the 3-year federal corruption probe. Why are the mayor and city council doing this? You have to chuckle, although it's sad. It's because they don't want a state takeover of Atlanta's airport, which is controlled by City Hall. The contracts are controlled by City Hall. You've had 12 people indicted or convicted over the last year because of corruption, where it's City Hall over contracts, especially at the airport. And so I think that the fact that they're arguing about this, I do agree with Kathy. I want to see what happens. You definitely don't want a mayor, whoever the mayor is, controlling contracts anymore. But let's have something like the World Congress Center or the Georgia Ports Authority that I don't think they've had a hint of scandal in a long time.
Darren?
You know, former President Harry S. Truman said, and I quote, "It is amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit." I think what we saw at City Hall this past week was a mayor who took the lead on this issue. You guys have heard me say it over and over again. I had to disagree a little bit with Kathy. She got started right away. She brought up open checkbook. She created this public trust commission, got the recommendation from the commission, which she created to basically create the IG inspector position. And so I think what I'm proud to say is that I saw the city council, particularly Councilwoman Councilmember Shook, and also Councilwoman Overstreet, come together with the departments and really, quite frankly, have a civil discussion. And it did have some push and pull. Some people wanted it to be stronger. I think the mayor wanted it to be a little stronger. But at the end of the day, when you got city departments, a mayor of Atlanta, and city council working together, that's democracy. And so I agree with Kathy that it's still another step. They've got to go back through the process again because this is a charter amendment, so they got to amend the charter. But I do think there won't be any changes. I think that the mayor, the city council, and everyone want to get this behind them. And I want to push back on what Phil is saying. They're not just doing it because the state, I believe, in a reckless way wants to interfere with the world's busiest and most efficient airport. This is something that they've been trying to do for a very long time. All these council members and the mayor, they needed time to uncover the depth of corruption that was going on there. So I think, again, all of them should be congratulated for doing what was right for the city.
Janelle, do you want a last word on this one?
Well, I just think we should just continue to watch. I know the Ethics and Compliance Board will be responsible for managing this process, and I think that's a good step, to be honest, to take it out of the hands of the mayor, so to speak. But I'm just going to keep watching as well.
All right. Well, in the city of Atlanta, still some major crimes were reported this week. Yet another shooting at Lenox Square. Looks like an Atlanta police interrupted an armed robbery in progress when they shot a man in the parking deck. Over on the Beltline, 76 cars broken into in one night. Phil, the numbers for what they're worth, I'm skeptical of crime numbers, well, they say overall crime is down, but if you take a look at murders and rapes and aggravated assaults within the city of Atlanta, they're up.
Well, they are up. In fact, murders are up shockingly, and these are self-reported numbers, but even if you're looking at self-reported numbers, it's scary. Rapes are up, assaults are up, and the city is divided by police zones, and some zones have far more crimes than others, so it is disingenuous to claim that crime is down. Crime is not down statewide. You just had on Friday morning, the AJC reported 26 members. Well, actually, the AJC did not report that 26 people arrested for drugs and arms trafficking in Athens were gang members, but indeed they were gang members. I'm tired of these cement-headed liberal editors of the AJC playing down the gang crisis in the state. And it is a crisis. You talk to the GBI director, you talk to the governor. The Georgia Gang Investigators Association says there's 71,000 gang members we have to deal with in this state.
So overall crime in Atlanta is down 2%. I mean, so let's give our viewers the actual number. But I do agree. I think that when you look at certain categories within how they calculate that number, certain categories are up. But here's the real issue, and I just want to say this. The issue we have in this city right now is really we're dealing with three departments. It's the chief of police for APD, and it's my good friend, District Attorney Paul Howard, and it's all of these judges. Because if we really want to get to the root of this problem, we also got to deal with some of the mental illness that goes along with some of these youth crime activities, because it's not just all gangs. These are people who are just in this revolving door. I just employ them, and I know that the district attorney watches this show. I know that the chief watches this show. If she doesn't watch, but maybe some of her deputy chiefs, and I know that all these judges watch the show. They need to get in a room, stop all this political bickering about whose fault it is, and just fix the crime issue here, because you got folks up in the north side of Atlanta who's blaming the judges, then you got the people on the south side who's saying that the police chief needs to spend more time on that side of town, but not just in Buckhead. I mean, and you got the district attorney who's saying, hey, I'll prosecute these cases, but I got to, get them on the dockets with a judge, and he's also complaining about the chief. So all three of them just need to meet sooner than later, because this crime issue is really, really big, and more importantly, we're losing lives, and people are just scared to go out of their houses. So I just employ them to have a meeting like this week, that like stop using a political football for election purposes and just fix this issue.
Yeah, I mean, Cathy, I go anywhere and you'll see me tote my computer because I don't want to leave it in my car. And what about all of this finger pointing?
Well, Theron's got it right. I mean, people have got to start figuring out, where the problem is, what the solution is, and holding people accountable. I've long thought that there ought to be a citizen group that's holding judges accountable for showing up, for doing their job, and there's not it's difficult to figure out who to vote for judges, because if you're not in the system, you kind of don't know what's going on, right? So I think there's that. I think we also have to really think about, when you look at the state budget cuts, and you look at cuts to mental health, you look at cuts to workplace development, you look at cuts to to things that can really make a difference at the front end of what turns people into criminal activity at the back end. I think that's important, and I think we have to look at the role that guns play and the availability of guns in this state. And I know Phil's getting ready to go off, but I'm gonna
That's absurd.
I'm gonna to use your vernacular, I'm gonna stand my ground here. Is that Georgia is a place that has some of the most liberal gun laws in the country, and we're seeing guns show up in the hands of kids, and
that's not true. There are
Sure
states that have gun control laws that have far more severe problems, and you know that, and I just want to clear that down.
Well, let me just jump in here really quick, because I think I kind of want to merge what Theron and Cathy both said. We do need to focus on what is the major issue that's happening as it relates to crime. I think something we are not talking about is the poor school systems. I know during the opportunity zone argument, when that was happening, a lot of people said the reason why people are committing crimes is because of the lack of opportunities. When now the economy is doing well, opportunities are available. So I do think that we need to stop coming up with excuses as to what we think it is, and focus on the real issue, which does go back to having strong discussions.
Let me do a quick footnote too. I want to try to help Mayor Bottoms in the city. I think that we have such a permissive police chief in Erica Shields that she ought to be gone, and I think that could make things a lot better. Why do you announce that you're not going to chase criminals anymore publicly? That's crazy.
All right, last word, Phil. Thank you. Coming up, the DeKalb school system is on the brink of losing its credit rating. We'll discuss that straight ahead.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
The DeKalb school system could soon lose its credit rating with Moody's because of missing financial information in the form of an audit. Cathy, this was a big mistake on someone's part because it's going to take at least 3 months to get this information.
Yeah, I mean, no one should be surprised that an audit is happening and should be able to be prepared for this. I think, one of the things that's just fundamental to what we're doing in government is to make sure that you're actually, doing those really core things you have to do. And this is not good. I feel sorry for folks in DeKalb. They keep, trying to get the government back on track, and then these kinds of things are a real setback. And when it costs more money to do the business, it comes back on taxpayers.
But real quick, I think that the one thing that gives me some hope is really the interim superintendent, Ramona Tyson. She's been there for a long time. She was interim before Michael Thurman took over the school system, and then she went back to a assistant superintendent role. She was there with Dr. Green. He's unfortunately left. So I think if anyone can actually get to the bottom of this, to Cathy's point, and retrieve all these documents, it definitely will be interim superintendent Tyson, because I think that she has the respect of her board, and more importantly, she has the respect of the teachers and the principals and administrators all across the county.
Well, we'll be watching. Well, the proposed state law would make it illegal for schools and businesses to discriminate against anyone based on their hairstyle. The bill's sponsor, Senator Tanya Anderson, says this really affects African American women disproportionately, especially when they wear braids. Janelle, I guess I will get you to weigh in on this first.
Okay, so all right, when it comes to this piece of legislation, this is where I'm split a little bit. So when it comes to public schools, I do feel as though parents have a say-so because they are stakeholders. It's paid for by taxpayers, which are the parents. However, when it comes to businesses, I am totally against this piece of legislation when it comes to businesses, and I'll tell you why. Speaking of a woman who is not against natural hair, both my mother and my sister have locks, so I'm not against natural hair. However, as a business owner, you're solely responsible for the image and the branding of that business. So you should be able to decide and determine who you want to have representing your company. And that's where I think that this should draw the line. And if you are a woman who wants to wear braids and wants to wear that and looks beautiful and that's fine, then you should do that in a place where it represents the branding of that business, or by all means start your own business. This is that type of country. It's a free country. Capitalism is real. So that's my stance on it.
So I always say you have nice TV hair. So what do you think?
Well, thank you. And I think that's a very sensible argument. And I think that you have to be careful when you're trying to regulate businesses. Yes, I think schools have a right to have dress codes and hair codes. And of course, Georgia, let's remember, is a state where you can fire without giving any reason whatsoever if you don't like an employee doing anything.
Anybody else? Kathy, Theron, you want to wait? Theron?
My grandmother told me don't ever talk about African American woman's hair. But no, I want to commend Senator Anderson for really just introducing this piece of legislation and, quite frankly, expanding the conversation.
Yes.
And I think she definitely should be commended for that.
I do too. Thank you. All right. Well, coming up, we'll have winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
I'm going to go first today because my first winner is Cathy Wood. We are so happy to announce that she is the new permanent panelist on the Georgia Gang. So welcome, your depth of knowledge, what you know about the inner workings of the city and the state. It's just been amazing, and it's been a pleasure to have you on. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Great. My other winner is a man by the name of Michael Davenport. Now, he's the street artist from Athens who has no arms but sketches beautifully by holding, look at that, a pen in his mouth. Well, guess what? My losers are the people who stole his bucket of donations and some of his materials. But I will say the community has really rallied around him, even Governor Kemp weighing in. That last check, they raised over $34,000 to help him. So that's just a sad story, but a touching ending. Kathy.
Hey, want to give a shout out on where people can contribute if they want to?
Yes, it's a GoFundMe page.
Oh, it's GoFundMe.
Yeah,
okay,
Michael
great.
Davenport.
Excellent, thank you. I've got my winner for this week is the city of Brookhaven and their elected officials. Brookhaven City Council passed unanimously a non-discrimination ordinance for the city, led by Councilmember Lindley Jones and new Councilmember Madeline Simmons. It was great. Citizens came down, business people came down in support of it, so I thought that was great. And then Representative Matthew Wilson, who I think is just a serious policy expert, doing a great job down there. He introduced last year the red flag law, asking for the ability to restrict gun ownership on people that pose a significant threat to themselves or to others. I know it's going to make Phil lose his mind, but I think he's doing a good thing, and I think it's an important discussion.
All right, Janelle.
Awesome. Okay, so I have two winners. And more so just kind of informational. So I'm on the board of the Concerned Black Clergy of Metro Atlanta. A lot of people don't know that. But they have a, the president, Reverend Betty Williams, is doing the State of the Community address on Monday, January 27th at 10 a.m. at Vickers Community Center. So I want to make sure I announce that. And then I want to send my prayers to the family of the Long County Deputy Sheldon Whiteman, who died in the line of duty this past week. So my hearts and prayers go out to that family.
Absolutely. Phil.
You know, it was a record year for Georgia tourism. They're the winner. More visitors, more good economic impact. Representative John Carson of Marietta is my winner. You know, he a couple years ago did the hands-free law. He says, and I agree with him, too many people are still texting. He has now introduced a bill to tighten up the penalties for texting and no more wiping off the first offense for people that are caught. You're not going to have that done anymore. And, you know, Representative Billy Mitchell, and I've had mixed feelings on this, but it's a good first step. He has introduced a bill whereby we would be paying student athletes. We could let these students do some marketing contracts. We'll see what happens with that.
Okay, Theron.
I agree with Phil. Billy Mitchell definitely is a winner. Glad that he introduced that bill. Also, we buried Bishop Quincy Carswell this week. He was a pastor for 44 years. So definitely want to send my condolences to his family. And also I want to give a big shout out to Fulton County Commission and MARTA. They voted unanimously this week to extend the 15th Amendment for MARTA. And so this is going to be going on in places like DeKalb and Clayton County, but definitely want to commend MARTA and Fulton County for working together to continue this amendment.
All right, well, that's big news. So thank you all so much, and welcome again, Cathy. We're happy to have you. All right, and that wraps up this week's Georgia Gang. We will see you again next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.